you can't have complete freedom and complete well-being, because people will choose to do things that screw up their lives. So unless you have a totalitarian nanny state, you give people freedom, they're going to do things that will lead to some bad outcomes. We're not all identical, and therefore anything that carries out the vision of some of us is going to be inimical to others. And so that's why a liberal democracy is basically a means for resolving disagreements, not a vision of what life ought to be. There's an inherent trade-off between equality of outcome and equality.
Yeah, so that's a good point. That's
Huge
James
point.
Lindsay always says that. The liberalism isn't meant to give you your life meaning. It's just meant, it's a system to allow you to choose and find meaning for yourself.
Yeah, it's a system to resolve conflict, which is something that we all deal with. Conflict is a regular part of life. If you don't have a good system to deal with it, life falls apart.
That's what's interesting, because you have all these people that want to replace liberalism with some moral system. And so they complain that liberalism doesn't have necessarily a moral component. It does, obviously, because the moral component is that the individual is the most important metric. But that, as you said, it's mostly a conflict, or at least the way it functions, is a conflict resolution. I guess morals in the meaning. It has morality, but doesn't have necessarily meaning baked into it.
Yeah.
And so they want to replace it with all these systems that have moral meaning baked into them. And then they complain that liberalism doesn't have that. And you're like, well, it's not supposed to. It's a conflict resolution mechanism.
Yeah.
It's a way we can get along without nuking each other, basically.
What do you mean by meaning? Because moral meaning doesn't really work for me. Like, I conceptualize moral in this very technical way that I mean, you do to a certain extent as well, but meaning, I think, is the real thing that people are missing. Like, they want something that gives them a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Right. Yeah, but see okay. So there's a reason, like, when people, so like if you said, like, hey, Sitch, did you like The Matrix? And I say, what do I say? Do I say, no, I didn't like The Matrix? Or do I say, no, The Matrix sucks? Okay, I say The Matrix sucks.
Yeah.
So when people have a tendency to ascribe their preferences as having a value judgment already in them. So I'm already because I'm not, like, there's ego there, because I'm not saying
that is good.
By me saying The Matrix sucks, I'm saying that The Matrix is objectively bad.
Yeah.
On some level.
You're creating a moral component to it. You're saying, not only do I think The Matrix is bad, you are obligated to think it's bad.
Right. I'm saying, not only do I think The Matrix is bad, The Matrix is bad. And if you don't also think it's bad, then you have a problem.
Person. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something wrong with you. Okay. So we do this so often, and we always ascribe these moral components to basically everything we do.
Yeah.
And so obviously, I would say that when something is important, is providing meaning to people's life. This is like because this could be one of the animating factors for their life. Now, something that important, they're going to ascribe a moral function to it. They're going to say, if you or your society is pushing you towards whatever I think is the meaning of life, then it's a moral society. If it's pushing you away from what I think is the meaning of life, it's an immoral society.
Yeah.
And so a lot of things like communism or fascism, they have the moral component of meaning baked into it. They already have a meaning, with communism, the meaning of life is to create a perfectly equal society.
Yeah. Utopia is the meaning.
Right. Right. And with fascism, it's the meaning of life is to create utopia via, going back to our roots or killing the Jews or whatever.
To live and die for my fellow, my fellow nationalists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so they complain because liberalism doesn't have necessarily the meaning, a motivating meaning, like end game of there's no end game to liberalism, right?
No.
It just is a system.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because often when people argue against liberalism, they try to use it as like a fault, when what Jordan Peterson's been talking about this whole time, you say, no, that's a good thing. You don't want your societal system to have necessarily a utopian goal in it, because that always leads down bad paths.
Yeah, you're not going to get everyone on the same page with the same utopia either.
Exactly. Because everyone has different visions of utopia and different ways to get there. And so that's why liberalism just functions as the conflict resolution method or system.
Wolfsbane for $4.99 says, "Hey Adam, what's the difference between Southern Baptist and Black Southern Baptist? I grew up BSB and didn't get much of the fire and brimstone." It could be the church that you went to. I mean, different churches obviously have different valences. It could be me. Like, I was just totally obsessed with Revelations and like the end of the world and stuff like that. So, it might be, and also different areas of the country. So, I mean, it could not be a pervasive thing, but I remember that we had some special guest speakers that spoke at my church that were very much about like end of days, and just the church filled up, just packed full of people. They were doing like 3-4 shows a day. It was so good.
Right.
So that really got a lot of people interested. And I think that sent people down that path. But I mean, I must have been 10 years old at the time. I think it was like in 4th or 5th grade. So very different environment, no social media, no like internet, no.
Yeah, of course.
None of that kind of stuff.
JMac for $20. Thanks so much, Jay. Says, asking permission to curse reminds me of when MTIs would be screaming in your face and then tone change and ask very nicely, "Is it okay if I touch you?"
I know. It's so out of place. Exactly. JMac gets
That's
it.
hilarious.
He totally gets it.
I didn't even think about that. That's super funny.
He's like, "I'm so angry I want to throw something. Is it okay if I throw something, honey?
Right.
Do you care if I throw this this thing?" It's like, well, what's the point of even throwing it now?
That's funny. Diogenes for $20 says, "Hey y'all, thoughts on transhumanism? And take your time, not only because I'm fascinated by the subject, but because it'll be very important in the near future. Also get Isaac Arthur on. Also read all tomorrow's."
We should do a full stream on transhumanism.
On transhumanism. Yeah, I know Adam is like super duper into transhumanism.
I've read all of Ray Kurzweil's books. Yeah. I've read tons of stuff on transhumanism, and I'm like a believer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me, it's like, it's just obviously where we're going to go. I've never really thought or cared about it because I'm like, well, I just think that's just obviously the direction humans will go. I don't know.
I just
don't even focus on it.
I think it's crazy in science fiction movies that they have any biological organism ever get out of a spaceship, because that just seems completely ridiculous to me. Like, obviously they're going to be robots. If we ever have contact with it's
a movie that has to have it's not going to be very interesting. There's more stakes of the person than a robot.
No, I understand. I completely understand. Yeah. But it's still, you're like, not really.
So I do think a lot of, like, right now we think of transhumanism as like, giving yourself robot parts. I do think a lot of transhumanism isn't going to be that. It's going to be genetic, biological manipulation.
Yeah, they'll be both, definitely.
Yeah, they'll be both, but I think I think biological stuff will always end up being mostly superior to robotic stuff until it gets so advanced that they can like transfer your brain and your consciousness into shit.
Yeah.
A-Rog for $50. Thank you so much, A-Rog. Says, conflict is created by an ideology that demands adherence and conformity. Religion is just one potential version of that. There are many others. True.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's most ideologies, unfortunately. But yeah, that's very true. Stacking Damage for $20 says, fandoms are just tiny, stupid religions. Glad A-Team and S-Class are nothing like that. Thanks for the stream, guys. Thank you, Stacking Damage.
That is not untrue.
It's not untrue.
Quality opportunity or rights. And since we're not all clones, that means that if you just allow people to achieve the most they can, some people will achieve more than others. And there is that trade-off if you don't want to have extremes of inequality. Added to the inevitability that whatever your vision of utopia is going to be, not everyone's going to agree with you. And in order to carry out a scheme that is perfectly laid out on paper, how do you deal with the people who don't get with the program? If you sincerely believe that the people who disagree with you are the only thing standing between the current world and a world that will be infinitely good forever, then you're justified in doing anything possible there to eliminate the ultimate evil, namely your enemies.
Exactly. Well, that's why it seems to be such a hazard, right? Because
Yep.
utopia, if utopia is perfect and it can be attained, then any means are acceptable to bring it about. And that I can't think of a more profound moral hazard than that.
Yeah, we're all kind of channeling Isaiah Berlin here, but they're good arguments.
Okay. So
I'd like to wait. Oh,
go ahead,
if you don't mind, Jordan.
John,
I'd like to take what Steve just said, which is so sensible. It makes perfect sense. Yes, we need a liberal democracy for all these reasons. But yet somehow it doesn't seem to inspire people the way that a God does. And yes, we could elevate human well-being. Let's all have a religion around human well-being, and we'll do whatever it takes to advance human well-being. Well, I get invited to speak at Christian colleges and Christian associations and podcasts sometimes because even though I'm a center-left atheist Jew, when they read The Righteous Mind, they find it useful and they see that I don't have the usual academic contempt for religion. I actually think religion, at least in the United States, religion on net is a very good thing. And so when I speak to Christian audiences, I often start off by saying, we actually agree on something extremely important, which is that there is a God-shaped hole in everyone's heart. And Pascal didn't say exactly that, but he said something more or less to that effect. And I say, yeah, there is a God-shaped hole in our heart. We just disagree on how it got there. And you think it's there because we long for God and God exists and God fills it. I think I'm a naturalist. I think we evolved to be religious. And I tell that story in The Righteous Mind, how we evolved for sacredness and gods and how gods have evolved culturally. And so I think central to our conversation here, or rather we're having this academic conversation in the context of a country going insane with bad religions. And by bad religions, what I mean is people have found something that fits the hole. And so it's deeply satisfying, but it makes them behave in ways that are incredibly destructive to a liberal democracy. Whereas the older religions at least went through a process of evolution, especially those that made it in a free country like America. They tend to be kind of nice. And so I would bring that perspective.
Okay, so I would.
That's interesting. Okay, so basically we live in a time of cults right now. We have a bunch of competing cults.
We do, yeah, new religions. Yeah.
We have the woke cults. We got the Trump cults. We have the monarchy cult now. We have all these cults.
I know.